الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أرحب بكم أجمل الترحيب في المحاضرة 18 لمادة إدارة التفاوض وحل النزاعات. هاي المحاضرة هي حالة عملية لمنظمة التجارة العالمية وإشكاليات الانضمام إليها وآلية الانضمام إليها. كل هاي التفاصيل إن شاء الله راح نتعرف عليها في هاي المحاضرة كجزء عملي من التفاوض وآلية الانضمام والتفاصيل الأخرى اللي تتعلق فيها. أول شيء نتعرف على آلية الحصول على عضوية المنظمة. تتطلب إجراءات الانضمام لمنظمة التجارة العالمية في ظل أحكام المادة 12 إعداد جدول الالتزامات في مجال السلع والخدمات إلى جانب اتفاق على تقرير مجموعة العمل، وبالإضافة إلى اتفاق على القرار والبروتوكول المتعلق بشروط الانضمام. الآن الخطوة الأخرى تقدم للعضوية. يتعين على أي دولة أو إقليم جمركي المرور بالإجراءات التالية: إرسال طلب إلى مدير المنظمة تعرب فيه عن رغبتها في الانضمام للمنظمة طبقا للمادة 12، ويوزع هذا الطلب على جميع الدول الأعضاء. يقوم المجلس العام للمنظمة بالنظر في الطلب وينشئ مجموعة عمل لفحص طلب الانضمام للمنظمة طبقا للشروط المرجعية ومدى مطابقة الطلب للمادة 12. تختار سكرتارية المنظمة الدولية طالبة الانضمام بإجراءات ومتطلبات الانضمام. تقديم المساعدات الفنية للدول الراغبة في الانضمام سواء من خلال سكرتارية المنظمة أو من خلال أعضاء في المنظمة. ويحق للسكرتارية فحص مستلزمات المساعدات الفنية اللازمة للدولة المتقدمة للانضمام لوضع خطط للمساعدة وللتنسيق فيما بين الدول المتقدمة لهذه المساعدات الفنية. كما تعرض السكرتارية المعنوية الفنية لأغراض إعداد المذكرات الخاصة بالانضمام والوثائق التالية للمذكرة. يجب إتاحة وقت كافي لمرحلة الإعداد لمفاوضات الانضمام قبل اجتماعات مجموعة العمل، وذلك لتمكين كل من طالب العضوية وأعضاء مجموعة العمل لإعداد أنفسهم بشكل جيد. وكقاعدة يجب أن يكون هناك فترة زمنية كافية، عموما تكون من 4 إلى 6 أسابيع، ما بين التوزيع الرسمي للوثائق الخاصة بالانضمام واجتماعات مجموعة العمل. ويتم تحديد تواريخ الاجتماعات بعد الموافقة على جدول الأعمال الأجندة ما عدا الوثائق اللازمة لكل اجتماع، على أن يراعى تحديد الهدف من كل اجتماع. تقوم السكرتارية بفحص مدى توافق مذكرة الانضمام مع شكل المحتوى المرفق، ويختار طالب العضوية وأعضاء مجموعة العمل بوجهة نظرها. في نفس الوقت تجهز السكرتارية نسخ من جدول التعريفة للدولة طالبة العضوية والقوانين والتنظيمات الأخرى المتعلقة بالانضمام لتكون متاحة للأعضاء في مجموعة العمل. وفيما يختص بالتطبيق الجمركي، فيتعين على الدول المتقدمة للانضمام أن ترسل نسخة كاملة وشاملة من القوانين المتعلقة بذلك وتعديلاتها إلى السكرتارية، مرفقا بها نسخة مترجمة إلى إحدى اللغات الرسمية للمنظمة، سواء كانت الإنجليزية أو الفرنسية أو الإسبانية أو أي لغة أخرى. يلي ذلك دعوة أعضاء مجموعة العمل لإرسال أسئلة مكتوبة بوجهة نظرهم في هيكل وسياسة التجارة الخارجية في الدولة طالبة العضوية، وطبقا لهيكل مذكرة الانضمام المعتمدة على المعلومات التي تم إعدادها. يكون هناك أكثر من جولة من الأسئلة والإجابات التي تكون معدة قبل الاجتماع الأول لمجموعة العمل، ويتم تصميم الجولة التالية بغرض اختيار ووضع قضايا قبل اجتماعات مجموعة العمل إذا كان ضروريا. يركز الاجتماع الأول لمجموعة العمل على فحص مشترك من قبل ممثلون من الدولة طالبة العضوية وأعضاء مجموعة العمل لمذكرة الانضمام والأسئلة والإجابات المعدة بوجهات النظر للبحث عن إيضاحات إضافية يمكن أن تكون مطلوبة في ضوء الشروط المتعددة لاتفاقية منظمة التجارة العالمية والاتفاقات المتعددة الأطراف. ويحدد رئيس المجموعة في نهاية كل اجتماع الخطوات التالية المطلوب إعدادها للاجتماعات المستقبلية بناء على استشارات غير رسمية مع أعضاء مجموعة العمل والسكرتارية. عندما يتم الفحص بواسطة مجموعة العمل فإن المفاوضات الثنائية يمكن أن تبدأ حول النفاذ إلى الأسواق على السلع والخدمات وموضوعات أخرى، وقد يتم تنفيذ هذه الخطوات إما بالتوازي أو بالتداخل. جداول الالتزامات يمكن ترخيص إجراءات إعداد جداول التفاوض على التنازلات والالتزامات على السلع والالتزامات المحددة على الخدمات على النحو التالي. في حالة السلع تمثل الجداول الأولية التي تتقدم بها الدولة طالبة العضوية مسودة لأعمال المفاوضات، ويتوقع الأعضاء المفاوضون أن تعكس مقترحات ربط الضريبة الاعتبارات التجارية القائمة على أسس ربحية. في حالة الخدمات تقوم الدولة طالبة العضوية بإعداد جدول يمثل الالتزامات بشكل محدد مسبقا، أو أن يتم تقديم هذا الجدول بناء على طلب الأعضاء المهتمين، على أن تكون المفاوضات على أسس الثنائي. وبعد الانتهاء من المفاوضات الثنائية بين الأعضاء المهتمين والدولة طالبة العضوية يتم إعداد جداول الالتزامات والتنازلات ومراجعة هذه الجداول من قبل بقية الأعضاء على أن تلتحق هذه الجداول أو تلحق هذه الجداول كملحق بروتوكول الانضمام. التقرير وبروتوكول الانضمام ودخوله حيز التنفيذ. يعكس تقرير مجموعة العمل ملخص للمناقشات في مجموعة العمل، ويرفع إلى المجلس العام للمنظمة والمؤتمر الوزاري معا مع مسودة القرار. وبروتوكول الانضمام عادة ما تكون بعض الالتزامات الانضمام مضمنة أو مضمنة في تقرير مجموعة العمل، ويشار إليها في بروتوكول الانضمام والذي يحوي شروط الانضمام المتفق عليها بين الدولة طالبة العضوية وأعضاء فريق أو مجموعة العمل. بعد الانتهاء من المفاوضات على جداول السلع والخدمات، وعندما تكمل مجموعة العمل تفويضها بهذا الخصوص، فإن مجموعة العمل ترسل تقريرها مرفقا به مسودة القرار وبروتوكول الانضمام إلى المجلس العام أو المؤتمر الوزاري. ويدخل بروتوكول الانضمام حيز التنفيذ بعد 30 يوما من تاريخ موافقة الدولة طالبة العضوية بعد تبني طلب المنظمة والمؤتمر الوزاري لتقرير لجنة العمل والحصول على الموافقة على مسودة القرار بغالبية ثلثي الأصوات في التصويت الذي يجري لهذا الغرض بين أعضاء منظمة التجارة العالمية. عضوية المنظمة. يبلغ عدد أعضاء المنظمة في وقت الإحصائية، لاحظوا كيف كمثال عملي، 147 دولة، معظمها من الدول النامية، منها 11 دولة عربية. أكيد في دول عربية انضمت بعد هذا التاريخ. لاحظوا كيف الدول المنضمة كانت في 2004: البحرين، جيبوتي، مصر، الأردن، الكويت، المغرب، عمان، قطر، تونس، الإمارات وموريتانيا، حتى 23 أبريل 2004. وهناك نحو 28 دولة طالبة للعضوية، منها 5 دول عربية هي الجزائر والسودان ولبنان والمملكة العربية السعودية واليمن. لاحظوا كيف. وتستطيع أي دولة غير عضو الانضمام إلى المنظمة عن طريق التفاوض. طبعا هاي الإحصائية قديمة، تعتبر في 2004. ويجب على الدولة الراغبة في الانضمام خلال مفاوضات الانضمام الموافقة على مجموعة من التعهدات التي تعد بمثابة ثمن تذكرة الانضمام، وهي اتخاذ الخطوات اللازمة لتعديل تشريعاتها الوطنية لتنسجم وقواعد الاتفاقات التجارية متعددة الأطراف، التعهد بتثبيت التعريف الجمركية وتعديل أنظمتها إذا اقتضى الأمر وفقا لنصوص الاتفاقات، وتقديم التزامات مقبولة في مجال الخدمات، مراعاة أن الاتفاقات حزمة واحدة من حيث الالتزام، ويتخذ المؤتمر الوزاري القرارات المتعلقة بالانضمام ويوافق على شروط الاتفاق الانضمام ثلثاء أعضاء المنظمة، ويجوز للعضو أن ينسحب من عضوية المنظمة، ويبدأ مفعول ذلك بعد انتهاء فترة 6 أشهر من التاريخ الذي يتلقى فيه المؤتمر العام للمنظمة اختارا كتابيا بالانسحاب. منظمة التجارة العالمية والبلدان النامية أوضحت الفترة منذ بدء العمل في اتفاقيات منظمة التجارة العالمية في الأول من يناير 1995 أن هناك العديد من القضايا التي تنادي الدول النامية بضرورة مراجعتها لدعم اعتبارات التنمية لديها، والبعد عن ازدواجية المعايير التي تتبعها بعض الدول المتقدمة عند التعامل مع متطلبات الاتفاقيات، وتسري هذه المعايير أساسا في مجال الدعم والنفاذ للأسواق واتفاقية الزراعة وإزالة الحصص ورفع الدعم عن الصادرات وحقوق الملكية الفكرية وغيرها، انطلاقا من المصالح الاقتصادية لهذه الدول وليس انطلاقا من المصالح التنموية لجميع البلدان الأعضاء خاصة الدول النامية. ولغرض تحديد أهم المحاور التي من شأنها أن تعزز البعد التنموي لعضوية البلدان النامية في المنظمة، يمكن الإشارة إلى الاعتبارات التالية: ألف، إعادة النظر في موقف البلدان المتقدمة الولايات المتحدة، الاتحاد الأوروبي واليابان في التخلص من دعم الصادرات الزراعية والدعم المحلي، فوفقا لاتفاقية الزراعة المنبثقة من جولة أورغواي مثلا هناك عددا من الالتزامات، منها النفاذ للأسواق ومعالجة الدعم المحلي ومنافسة الصادرات وقضايا صحة النباتات والدعم المقدم للمزارعين والمزارعين المحليين. رغم أن الاتحاد الأوروبي قد اتخذ عددا من الخطوات في يونيو 2003 في اتجاه تحرير التجارة الزراعية من خلال التصديق على إصلاح السياسة الزراعية المشتركة، إلا أن المشكلة لا زالت قائمة مع الولايات المتحدة التي أصدرت عام 2002 قانونا زراعيا يزيد من الدعم الزراعي للمزارعين المحليين بنسبة 80%، ونفس الشيء بالنسبة لليابان التي تفرض رسوما جمركية مرتفعة على عدد من السلع المستوردة مثل الأرز. كما تكمن المشكلة الأخرى فيما يسمى ببند السلام الوارد باتفاقية الزراعة، والذي يحمي الولايات المتحدة والاتحاد الأوروبي من اعتراض بقية أعضاء المنظمة على بعض إشكال الدعم الزراعي الذي يمكن أن تفسر البلدان النامية على أنه خرق لقواعد المنظمة. وقد انتهى العمل بهذا البند في ديسمبر 2003، وتصر الولايات المتحدة على تجديده إلى أن فشل المؤتمر الوزاري الخاص في كانكون المكسيك لم يتيح لها ذلك. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك فإن السياسات الواردة تحت ما يسمى بالصندوق الأخضر، ويشمل السلع المعفاة من تخفيض الدعم المزمع تخفيضه باتفاقية الزراعة، تستثني الولايات المتحدة من رفع الدعم المباشر للمصدرين الزراعيين بدعوى أن هذا الدعم لا يعبر مشوها للتجارة الدولية أو أنه دعم غير مرتبط بالإنتاج. إن اتفاقية اعتبارات الملكية الفكرية المرتبطة بالتجارة تلقي التزامات مالية ضخمة على كاهل البلدان النامية والأقل نموا، خاصة في مجال صناعة الأدوية، وبشكل خاص في تلك الدول التي بحاجة إلى أدوية لمعالجة الإيدز والأمراض المستثرية الأخرى. لذلك فإن هناك بعض المقترحات التي تدعو إلى التخلص من هذه الاتفاقية وإعادة مسؤولية حقوق الملكية الفكرية، إلا أن المنظمة الدولية لحقوق الملكية الفكرية وفي أسوأ الأحوال لابد من استبعاد الأدوية والبذور الزراعية والنباتات من الاتفاقية. من المشاكل اللي بتواجهها البلدان النامية، لاحظوا كيف أن هناك من البلدان النامية التي بحاجة إلى أدوية ذات علامة تجارية، إلى أن هذه الدول لا يمكنها استخدام ترخيص إنتاج هذه الأدوية في بلدانها. مثلا على سبيل المثال، لاحظوا إذن هاي يعني بنود مختلفة تتعلق في الاتفاقية. لاحظوا كيف كلها تعتبر بنود تتعلق بالاتفاقية وتفاصيلها. جولات التفاوض منذ إنشاء الجات. لاحظوا كيف تعمل منظمة التجارة العالمية. مهم يعني جدا تعرفوا كمثال عملي اللي هي منظمة التجارة العالمية World Trade Organization. يرى صناع السياسة في الدول المتقدمة والمنظمات الدولية أن انخفاض معدلات النمو لدى الدول النامية وانتشار الفقر بدلا من تراجعه في عدد كبير منها يمثل مشكلة حلها واضح وبسيط، ألا وهو اتباع سياسات اقتصادية جيدة وإصلاح المؤسسات مثل ما فعلت الدول المتقدمة. لاحظوا كيف بيحكي الآن عن سياسة التجارة الخارجية لبعض الدول مثل أمريكا وألمانيا، وأيضا بسهل في هذا الكلام. أيضا الديمقراطية، لاحظوا حق الاختراع للذكور كان نادرا حتى عام 1920 عفوا. إسبانيا والبرتغال كانتا دول ديكتاتورية حتى عام 1970. لم تحصل الأقليات العرقية في حق التصويت في كل من أستراليا وأمريكا إلا في 62 و65. لم تحصل المرأة على حق التصويت إلا بعد الحرب العالمية الثانية في هذه الدول. لاحظوا، وتأخر في سويسرا. إذن كل هاي إحصائيات وأرقام لها علاقة بالملكية الفكرية، ولها علاقة بالجهاز الإداري، هل هو ديكتاتوري أم بيروقراطي. كل هذا يعتبر مثال عملي لموضوع دخول وانضمام إلى المنظمة الدولية. لاحظوا كيف مؤسسات تنظيم إدارة الشركات والمؤسسات المالية تعتبر في الوقت الحالي أدوات حاكمية الشركات الحديثة، فقد نشأت في الدول المتقدمة بعد وليس قبل تطورها الصناعي. لاحظوا كانت قوانين الإفلاس موجهة لمعاقبة المفلسين وإيداعهم في السجون بدلا من إعطائهم فرصة ثانية حتى أواخر القرن ال19. لم يكن هناك بنوكا مركزية في كل من السويد وألمانيا وإيطاليا وسويسرا حتى أوائل القرن العشرين. أول بنك مركزي في العالم كان البنك المركزي البريطاني، تم تأسيسه عام 64 ولم يتم إنشاؤه إلا بقانون تنظيم البنوك الصادر عام 1844. لاحظوا كيف مؤسسات الرعاية الاجتماعية مثل التأمين ضد الحوادث، التأمين الصحي، المعاشات الحكومية، والتأمين ضد البطالة لم تكن موجودة في معظم الدول حتى العقود القليلة الأخيرة. مثال، في عام 1820 كانت إنجلترا أكثر تطورا من الهند حاليا من حيث مستوى نصيب الفرد من الدخل القومي، إلا أن إنجلترا لم يكن لديها العديد من المؤسسات الموجودة في الهند اليوم مثل حق التصويت، بنك المركزي، تنظيم لسوق الأوراق المالية، ضريبة الدخل، أو قانون الإفلاس. لاحظوا أيضا هذا مثال آخر. في عام 1913 كانت أمريكا في مستوى مماثل من التطور لمستوى المكسيك اليوم، لكن مستوى مؤسساتها كان مختلفا عما نراه في المكسيك اليوم، مثل حقوق التصويت للمرأة والأقليات السود والهنود الحمر وقانون الإفلاس والملكية الفكرية. كل هذا يختلف ما بين دولة وأخرى، وتتطور هاي القوانين والأحداث وأيضا آليات الانضمام من سنة إلى أخرى. نكون مع الفيديو العملي لهذه المحاضرة.
Today's unit involves how to change from a wandering generality to a meaningful specific. When I was a young boy, I heard a rather fascinating story. The story was about this guy whose wife sent him downtown to buy ham. He got home with ham, and she said, "Why, honey, you didn't have them cut the end off." And he said, "Well, you didn't tell me to." She said, "I thought you knew we always cut the end of the ham off." He said, "Why?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my mama always cut the end of the ham off." He said, "Well, Mama's back in the kitchen. Let's go ask her." Went back to the kitchen and said, "Mama, why do you always cut the end of the ham off?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my mama always cut the end of the ham off." Well, this guy said, "We're going to solve this three-generation mystery right now." So they got on the phone, called long distance, and said, "Grandma, why do you always cut the end of the ham off?" She said, "I always cut the end of the ham off because my roaster was too small." Now, you see, Grandma really had a reason. But the truth is, most people do not have legitimate reasons for a lot of the things that they do. In this unit, we're going to carefully look at why you must have your goals, and then how you set those goals. Because most people, unfortunately, do go through life as that wandering generality. 97% of the people on this earth do not really have an organized goals program. Now, that's not to say they do not have some individual goals, because certainly they do. But they do not have a total and complete program itself, which enables them to win in every area of life. Now, why is it that 97% of the people just do not have that goals program? Well, the first reason literally is fear. Now, fear, as you well know, is spelled F-E-A-R. That forms an acrostic for false evidence appearing real. But if it appears real, as a practical matter, then it is real. For example, I could come into your city, I don't care where you live in this world, and rob your bank with nothing but a handkerchief. All I'd have to do is put that handkerchief over my face, put my finger in my pocket, and stick it at the teller and say, "Give me your money." Now, the evidence would be false, but that fear would be real, and so they would literally give me the money. Now, they'd probably shoot me before I got out of the bank, but I would have the money. Several years ago, a young Cuban hijacked a plane to Cuba with a bar of soap. That's all he had. He put the soap in a box. He said to the captain of the aircraft, "This is a bomb. Let's go to Cuba." They went to Cuba. The evidence was false, but it appeared real, and consequently, they acted accordingly. Now, tomorrow morning, I get on a plane, as I do an awful lot of the mornings, and I'll be headed to Dallas, Texas. Now, I recognize the fact that when I get aboard that plane, there's a certain amount of danger involved. As you know, some planes do come down an awful lot faster than they go up. There's a certain amount of danger for that plane. But let me tell you something fascinating. There's even more danger for that plane if it stays on the ground. Did you realize that an airplane will literally rust out sitting on the runway faster than it will wear out flying in the air? And that's what airplanes are built for. You see, there's a certain danger in setting goals, but there's an even greater danger if you do not set those goals. Many years ago, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a brilliant writer, a very famous jurist, an inventor, an unusual man, put it this way: the great loss in our society is not the waste of our natural resources, though that is great. He said the great loss to society is the waste of our human resources, simply because we do not recognize our own ability and then aim that ability in a specific direction. You see, man and nature are 180 degrees apart. We use up nature's natural resources by using them up. We use up man's natural resources by not using them at all. Yes, there's a certain amount of risk in setting goals, but there's even more risk in not setting them. The risk comes from the fact that truthfully you might not reach your goal, and then where are you going to be? You might be a little embarrassed about it, but let me say it again. The risk is infinitely greater if you do not set them, because you will be unable to use the incredible ability which you have. Yes, the first reason 97% of the people on this earth have no organized goals program is because of fear. Now, the second reason most people do not have goals is they have never really been sold. Now, that's my job. In this unit today, I'm flat gonna sell you on why you got to have those goals. Now, I didn't say I was gonna try to. Didn't say I wanted to. Didn't say I hoped to. Didn't say I planned to. I flat said I am going to sell you on why you've got to have your goals. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do such a good job on selling you on having your goals program put together that before you go to bed tonight, you will have already taken some of the steps. I'll even put it stronger than that. If you don't take some of these steps towards setting those goals, you might as well not go to bed tonight as far as sleep is concerned, because you are not even going to be able to go to sleep. Let me say it again. You might as well not even go to bed. You are not going to be able to go to sleep. Now, the basic problem is many times, regardless of where you live, an individual is working on the job. And here's where the wandering generality comes in. They're working on the job, but they get to thinking, you know, I really ought to be spending more time with my family. And then when they're spending time with their family, get saying, you know, I really ought to be out there working for my family. And so when they're out there working for their family, their mind is back home. And when they're back home, their mind is back out there in the field. Then they tell everybody, well, I don't ever have time to do anything. No wonder. You're always traveling. You see, there are a lot of people who go to work tomorrow because that's what they did yesterday. But if that's the only reason for going to work tomorrow, then you're not going to be as good tomorrow as you were yesterday, because now you're 2 days older and no closer to the goals which you do not have. You cannot make it as a wandering generality. Oh, you can survive. Anybody who can get out of a telephone booth without written directions on the side can survive. But I'm not talking about survival. I'm talking about winning, and I'm talking about winning big. A number of years ago, to emphasize the wandering generality aspect, Jean-Henri Fabre, the great French naturalist, did a series of experiments with some processionary caterpillars, so named because they follow each other in a procession. He lined them around a flower pot until they formed a never-ending circle. They started going round and round and round. In the center of the flower pot was some pine needles, which is one of the foods of the processionary caterpillar. 24 hours they went round and round, then 48 hours, then 72 hours, on and on they went. For 7 full days and 7 full nights, they went round and round until they literally dropped dead from starvation and exhaustion. With an abundance of their favorite food 6 inches away, they had starved to death because they confused activity with accomplishment. In your organization, I'll absolutely guarantee it, if you've got a dozen people in your organization, you're going to have at least one person there who is forever busy. I mean, they go here, they go there, they do this, they do that. They're into this, they're into that. And when they get there every day, their desk is piled high. And when they leave every day, the desk is still piled high. And the number of completed tasks which they have accomplished is very minimal. They are wandering generalities. Now, let me tell you something, folks. Lack of time is not the difficulty. You know, you hear people talking about, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that. The most successful human being on earth does not have one more minute than the most unsuccessful human being has. It is not lack of time that's the problem. It is the lack of direction. Years ago, the great merchant J.C. Penney put it this way: you give me a stock clerk with a goal, and I'll give you a person who will make history. But you give me a person without those goals, and I will show you a stock clerk. You got to have goals. Can you imagine the chairman of the board for a major corporation like, let's say, General Motors, and somebody says to him, they ask the question, how'd you get to be the chairman of the board for General Motors? And he says, well, I just showed up for work, and they started promoting me, and first thing you know, here I am, chairman of the board. Would you believe it if somebody said that when Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to scale Mount Everest, when he climbed down off that mountain, and somebody came to him and said, Sir Edmund, how'd you climb the tallest mountain in the whole world? Do you really think? He said, well, I was just out walking around. Incredible. And yet there's so many people who think they can make it just by showing up for work and doing the best they can. Well, I'm in favor of both of those. But the best you can includes preparation and planning and direction. Probably the most amazing direction or example I could use, and incidentally, I want to emphasize this. Goals work personally. They work for families. They work for companies. And in this example, I will demonstrate that they work for nations. Japan in 1950 was absolutely devastated. They had the highest percentage of their young men whom they had lost in war than any nation in the last 200 years. Their cities had been burned out. Their economy was in an absolute shambles. Now they called a sales meeting. Now I hasten to add that they didn't identify it as a sales meeting, but that's actually what it was. Sales meeting, marketing strategy, you name it. They called the government leaders, the leaders of industry, the leaders in the educational society. They got them all together and they laid out a plan. What can we as a nation do to unify us, to put us together and accomplish an objective that will restore national pride and bring economic prosperity to our land? They finally decided that in the 50s their goal would be to become the #1 nation in the world in the production of textiles. They reached their goal. In 1960 they got together another sales meeting and they said, what's our goal this decade? And they decided on the impossible dream. They said, let's become the #1 nation in the world in the production of steel. Now, why is this the impossible dream? Very simple. Japan has no natural resources. They do not have the coal or the petroleum or the iron ore. They were going to have to haul the natural resources, the raw materials, from thousands of miles away into their land, build those modern steel mills, manufacture a top-grade steel, ship it thousands of miles back, and sell it at a competitive price. Absolutely an impossible dream. But they did not look at what they did not have, which was the natural resources. They looked at what they did have, a willingness to work, a creative society, a nation that was pulling together towards a worthwhile objective. I'm here to tell you they reached their goal. 1970, they had another meeting. They said, in this decade, let's set the goal. And that goal, pure and simple, is we want to become, in this decade, the #1 nation in the world in the production of automobiles. They missed it. 1 year. That's all. In 1980, they set another goal. They said, in this decade, let's become #1 in the world in the production of electronics and computers. Now, I don't need to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, what happened in the 80s. It's absolutely fascinating. Goals absolutely work. You got to have them. In 1953, the graduates of Yale University were studied and analyzed. And they asked the questions about goals, and here's what they discovered. They discovered that only 3% of the seniors at Yale University had actually taken the necessary steps as far as setting those goals are concerned. Namely, they had identified what they wanted and had written them down. Now, to go along with that, they had listed the benefits. Now, let me emphasize something very important. The most significant part of setting a goal is to identify the benefits. You know, a lot of times an individual might have a goal, and that goal might be, well, I'm going to lose 35 pounds. And then you know what they talk about? Oh, I'm going to have to give up this and give up that and give up the other. I'm going to have to quit this and quit that. I'm going to have to surrender, sacrifice. And you can almost see them go through the halo adjusting process. Poor little me. They have a series of pity parties when they start setting their goals. They think of the price they've got to pay instead of the benefits which are coming their way. Now, for salespeople and marketing people, let me give you a fact of life. If all you talked about was price when you're trying to make a sale, I can guarantee you your sales would have a dramatic decline. What we emphasize are the benefits. The most important step in the goal-setting program is to identify those benefits. What is in it for me? Then the third thing that these seniors at Yale did, the 3%, they identified the obstacles. James Baldwin was absolutely right when he said, confronting a problem does not always bring a solution, but until you confront the problem, there can be no solution. The reality is something stands between you and your goal. If that were not true, you would already be there. You've got to spell it out. What are the obstacles? That's what the 3% did. And then the fourth step is you've got to identify what you need to know in order to get there. There's some missing information that you got to have. What is it that I need to know in order to get there? And then the fifth thing that they did, they identified the people, the groups, and the organizations they needed to work with in order to get there. If you're going to accomplish anything of any significance, it requires other people working with you. As a simple example, the giant Belgian horse on its own can pull 8,000 pounds. If you hook him up with another giant Belgian horse, together they can pull 18,000 pounds. But if you send them to training school and teach them to pull in harmony, then the team can pull in excess of 25,000 pounds. Working together, teamwork. Who are the groups, the people, the organizations I need to work with? And then obviously the next step has got to be a specific game plan, a plan of action, if you will. Can you imagine two coaches on opposite teams, whether they're coaching soccer or football or whatever, and here they are playing for the world's championship, and the day before the game, they call the team together and say, well, now, you know, we got a pretty tough opponent tomorrow. We better figure out what we are going to do. And, of course, we kind of smile at that and say, that's insane. I agree with you. They organize, they plan, they develop a plan of action for a game. I'm talking to you about a plan for life. A balanced plan, so that you win in every area of life. Now, 3% of these Yale seniors did that, and then they had taken the seventh step, too. They had established the date when they expected to be there. You want to be the chairman of the board. If you want to win at home, if you want to win personally, if you want to win financially, if you want to have all of the winning aspect, it really takes a goals program. Now, interestingly enough, 10% of those graduating seniors from Yale University had taken about 5 of the steps, but the overwhelming majority, outside of knowing they wanted to be a doctor or a professor or an attorney, they really had no solid goals program. 20 years later, they did a study in the two areas which they could measure, namely career and financial. And the 3% who had taken all of the steps had literally accomplished more than the other 97% combined. It's been said often, people don't plan to fail, but they do fail to plan. I bet that's not the first time anybody who will ever view this unit has ever heard that. It's old, but let me tell you why it's old. It's old because it's true. If it weren't true, it wouldn't be old, it'd be dead. I mean, it would have long outlived its usefulness. You absolutely must have those goals. Now, for many people in this world of ours, the name Howard Hill will have no significance. He was raised over in Alabama. Howard Hill was an archer. He was a good one. He won 286 consecutive archery tournaments. As a matter of fact, he was never beaten in competition. It finally reached the point where he retired because the best bowmen in the world would not compete because they did not want to compete for second place. He killed a bull elephant with a bow and arrow, a Bengal tiger with a bow and arrow, a Cape buffalo with a bow and arrow. He killed an 18-foot shark under 15 feet of water. Or was it a 15-foot shark under 18 feet of water? It was one. Oh, no, it was a big one, and he was way down there. When I was a youngster, I've seen newsreels of Howard Hill where from 50 feet he would literally split the bullseye. I mean, perfectly in the center. Then he would take his next arrow and split the first one. A remarkable demonstration of skill. Now, I've never professionally shot the bow and arrow, but I am an instructor extraordinary. That just means I'm good. Real good. As a matter of fact, I'm so good as an instructor that I could spend 20 minutes with you personally, and regardless of what part of the world you live in, provided your eyesight is good and your health is good, at the end of 20 minutes, I would have you hitting the bullseye more consistently than Howard Hill could have hit it the best day he ever had as a bowman. Provided, of course, we had first blindfolded Howard Hill and turn him around a few times so he'd have no idea as to where he was. And you kind of sit there thinking, Ziegler, you dirty dog. Of course, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How on earth, Ziegler, you know we could beat him then. How on earth could a person possibly hit a target he could not even see? You know, that's a good question. Let me give you one even better. How can you hit a target you do not even have? Have you got yours? I mean, in every phase of your life. Have you identified it and written it down? Have you specifically listed the benefits which are yours? Have you identified the obstacles which you have to overcome in order to get there? Have you put together the information you need in order to make this plan work? Have you identified the people, the groups, the organizations you need to work with in order for it to happen? Have you laid out a carefully designed game plan? Something that you cannot do in 5 minutes or in many cases in 5 hours. But have you developed a specific plan of action? Now, you know what's fascinating? Those Yale seniors, in most cases, had planned all of their life to go to Yale. Then they get there, that goal is accomplished, and they don't make the goals and the plans beyond that point. You absolutely must have the goals. You got to establish those dates. When you put all of those things together, then it's amazing how much more time you will have to work on the things that are important. It's amazing the amount of time that you will be able to save because you will be aimed at things which are important. Now, why is that important? I cannot say for the rest of the world, but in America, over 80% of all of the college graduates, 10 years after they've graduated, are working in a field which is totally unrelated to what they majored in when they were in college. What an incredible waste of time. How much further would they have been along the way had they taken those steps initially and worked through these exercises to determine literally where they were? Now, in order to wrap this unit up, to kind of pull it together, let me simply say that the first thing we've got to do is we've got to eliminate fear. Now, that's easy to say, but how do you eliminate fear? You look at the alternatives. When fear deals with us, think of all the things we lose as versus when we rationalize, much as we talked about the airplane trip, you understand. There's a certain amount of danger for the plane if it leaves the ground, but it's more danger if it stays on the ground. There's a certain danger in setting goals because you might not reach them. But think of the greater danger if you don't set those goals. Rationalize it. Look at it realistically. Then buy the idea that I've been saying that you must have those goals. Then obviously you take the 7 steps that we have emphasized twice already in this unit. The steps absolutely are critical, ladies and gentlemen. You need to take them in order to set the goals which are so important to have in your life. Yes, goals are enormously important. The fourth step, the fourth thing we need to do is we need to really listen carefully to the Sir Edmund Hillary story. The first time Sir Edmund Hillary attempted to scale Mount Everest, he did not make it. As a matter of fact, he left, I believe it was 3 of his mountain climbers dead on the mountainside. But because his effort had been so enormous, the English government awarded him its highest honor. They called him before the Parliament. And as he walked in, to a person, everybody there rose and gave him a prolonged standing ovation. As Sir Edmund Hillary moved to the front of the room, there was a giant picture behind where he was to be standing, and the picture was that of the peak of Mount Everest. It was an awesome picture. Sir Edmund Hillary largely ignored the crowd, ignored the applause. He ignored everything that was being said by the people in the audience. He literally stood directly in front of that picture for a moment or two, and then he shook his fist at Mount Everest. And he said, "You won this time, but you're as big as you're ever going to get. I'm still growing." History tells us he made it the next go-round. Your history will record that if you persist in your goals that you're now going to set, that you'll win if you pursue those goals. Buy those ideas that we've been sharing. Take these steps, because if you do, I'll close by saying I'll see you. And yes, I really do mean you at the top.
Our session today is titled How to Educate, Not Just Train Your Employee. In this session, we'll talk about the difference between education and training, how you need to do both, and we'll discuss the important steps that you need to consider to implement a solid program in your company. Every organization has people, and people must be developed if they are to do a good job. Some of that training we call technical training. For example, somebody in your factory doing a certain job, you must show them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. That's technical training. For example, a receptionist must know how to answer the telephone, what to say, how to answer questions from people who may be calling. But you know what? We make a terrible mistake when we stop only at technical training. We must, in this day and age, we must help our people to be developed behaviorally. Who am I? What can I do? What would make me better? How can I become a better communicator? So on and so forth. So there is technical training, and then there is behavioral training. That behavioral training I call education. And today we'll discuss the differences between training and education and how you can make a spectacular job with your people, learning both, using both, and therefore hopefully performing better than you ever thought possible. I walked one day into a McDonald's. McDonald's is one of the world's most successful fast food restaurants. And a young, attractive woman behind the counter looked at me and she said, "Hello, sir. How may I serve you today?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to have a vanilla milkshake and an apple pie." And she said, "Sir, would you like a dessert to go with that?" I thought, sure, why don't you give me a hamburger and a Coca-Cola? You see what happened there? This woman was trained to sell desserts. If only we could sell enough sweet goods, we could make more money. But she did not stop short enough to think, to understand, to internalize that vanilla milkshake and apple pie are desserts. Her mind and her mouth did not work together, and she got herself in trouble. We do things like that, don't we? Training and education get in the way of excellent performance. Let me share with you today some major differences between training and education. Training teaches people what to do. Education teaches people what to be. Training is anchored to the past. In other words, the things that we have done and have done well, let's do more of them. Education looks towards the future. To accommodate change, training has to be unlearned. You must take this human being and you must make sure that they forget about all these things they have done in the past. And then teach them something new. Education. Education can build upon the past. In education, you can go from the known to the unknown. You don't have to unlearn. You simply build in your mind on those things that you already know. Training deals with actions, with tasks. Education deals with thoughts and feelings. And thoughts and feelings are those determining factors for our behavior. We act because we think and we feel, and our actions become better when that really happens. Training teaches how. Education teaches why. If you expect your people to solve problems time and again, to address different circumstances with different people in different ways, and do a good job every time, you must teach them why, not only how, so that they can use this thinking process to make good things happen. Training focuses on procedures. Education focuses on people. And any organization and any business that you can think of, if you were to take the people element out of it, what have we got left? Without people, you and I could not really accomplish much. Training focuses on the individual. Education focuses on the whole organization. And while an organization is the cumulative effect of individuals, it is a completely different person who is in the organization than that person who becomes like the fingers on one hand, come together to make great things happen. So we must concentrate on the organization, not only on the individual, if we expect teamwork to take place, if we expect results to be accomplished. Training teaches people to follow prescriptions. Here's what to do. Here's when to do it. Here's who to do it with. Education teaches people to make choices. You know what, my friends? You and I today are the sum total of the choices that you and I have made in our life up to this point. And you and I, tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now, will be the person or persons based on the choices we will make between now and then. It is imperative that we teach our people how to make choices that will strengthen our organization and will take our company onwards and upwards. Training, you might say, is a program. A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, 4. Education is a process. It is a journey. It is a way of thinking. It is the development of a mindset. Now, if we were to put together in your organization an educational program, that is to say, training of technical matter and education of behavioral matter, what are some pillars, what are some principles, what are some foundations that you must pay attention to make sure that things are done properly? I'd like to share with you 3 of those. Here's the first one. Number 1, integrated learning process. Integrated learning process. In other words, in your company, in your business, when you attempt to train somebody, to educate somebody, you must make sure that everything that you say and everything that you do is integrated. It all comes together. Let me share with you an example. Some companies, for example, will educate and train their salespeople on how to sell. But then they forget to bring the sales manager into this educational process and say, let us tell you what we have just taught your salespeople in your region. So here's what happens. We train this salesperson, and then we take the salesperson, put him back out in the field, and the salesperson goes back to the same environment from which he or she had come. Their sales manager does not know the material that the salesperson learned, and therefore cannot carry it out in a functional way, in a real way in life. To really be integrated is to ensure that all layers of people who work together receive the same kind of education. And to make sure that the manager, for example, knows what to do with this salesperson once the salesperson has come back from some training session or some educational environment. So first, we must make sure that we have an integrated learning process. Second, we must make sure that the education that we give people in our organization is congruent. You know what happens in so many organizations, which absolutely surprises me and baffles me, is that we tell people certain things. In fact, we teach people certain things, and then we do things that are not congruent with what we taught them. What happens, I ask you? What happens to a person who works for you or with you, who goes to a seminar or a class and listens and learns some very significant information that could change his or her behavior, and then they come back to the same environment where they were in the first place, and they find that in that environment, things are done differently? Do you honestly believe that this learned person is going to take this information and change the environment? You know what most of us do? Most of us will fall right back into the trap of what is. I'll do what my boss wants me to do. I'll do whatever the environment requires of me, because that's the safest way to do it. A principle about human beings might be this, that most people would rather be comfortable than be excellent. Most of us would rather be comfortable than be excellent. And if we would rather be comfortable, we would rather be what? Trained. Remember, training is a mechanical process. But to be educated, you ask me to go beyond the glass ceiling. You ask me to sort of stretch, become better, give more, do more, think in a wider spectrum. And that is more difficult for people to do. So organizations that truly want to change behavior, achieve more, are organizations that must ensure that the environment, the policies, the procedures, the behaviors of bosses, for example, are congruent with the ideas and the content and the material that people hear and learn. And the third very important foundation is to ensure that when we give people education and training, we develop the whole person. Now, to take the example of the salesperson again. Generally speaking, when you want to develop and train a salesperson, what do you want to do? You want to teach him some skills about selling. How to prospect, how to sell, how to overcome objections, how to close the sale, how to follow up, all of which are very valuable principles for selling skills. But might that really develop that salesperson completely? No. Why? Because if that salesperson is to become a superb salesperson, he or she must first also know other areas that actually affect their behavior. For example, we have to enable the salesperson to learn how to communicate, how to speak, how to listen, how to observe, how to write. We must, of course, help that salesperson to learn some issues about his or her own behavior, personal and professional development, you might argue. And then also help them understand some ideas about selling. So the training and education must appeal to the whole person if we are truly to achieve lasting results. I'd like in the next few moments to share with you 10 steps, 10 significant steps that if you were to follow them in your company or your department or your office with your own group of 4 or 5 or all of the employees in your company, your 100 or 1,000 or 3,000 employees. If you would follow these 10 steps, you will be able to put together a very congruent, a very integrated, a very solid educational program that will enable your organization to grow and become better and to get more from your people while they are loving it. There they are. Step number 1. If you are to structure a successful educational program, you must, number 1, first and foremost, you must seek the commitment of top management. My dear friends, in 25 years of consulting with some of the finest organizations around the world, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I can tell you thoroughly and completely that if the boss or bosses, if the president or the board, if the division chairman or whomever you may be reporting to is not committed to the process of developing people, just about the time you get yourself going in this process, they will do something to cut it short or to take funding away from it or to not allow you to follow through with it the way you had envisioned. You must get the commitment of the people at the top. Step number 2. It's called assessment. You must then assess the needs of the people in our organization. Who are they? What do they need? How can I help them become better? What ideas may be very valuable for them? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What would turn them on? What would entice them and motivate them to become better? What are the things that are keeping them from becoming excellent? What are the things, if they only were to have these ideas, they will truly become wonderful performers? What are those things? You might call this needs analysis. What are the needs in our organization? So first, commitment, then assessment. Thirdly, conceptualization. Now let us conceptualize together what this educational and training program might look like. What are the subjects we're going to cover? On what topic? people who are going to be involved in these topics. Step number 4, structuring. You now are in a position to structure literally that program that you want to offer. For example, you might say, I want to bring this group together once a month. We're going to put them in a class, on-site or off-site. We want to put them in groups of 8 or 10 or 12. We're going to take one department at a time. Or we want to mingle people from various departments. Structuring means all the elements that will make the educational program take shape. It will be similar to you building a house. If you wanted to build a house, what would you do? You will conceptualize it on a blueprint, on a piece of paper. Maybe you will get an architect, an engineer to help you with that. And then you will structure it. You will say, this wall's going here, this wall's going here, a window's going here, and a door is going there, the stairs will be here, and so on and so forth. The same thing here. You structure this program in the way that it will be offered. The next step then is that you begin the creation process. Let us create it. What does this involve? Does it involve written material? Does it involve videos? Does it involve manuals or workbooks? What is this content we're going to teach? What are the elements needed to make this content come together? And then you administer the program. You carry it out. You begin to do all these things that you've envisioned, all these things that you've talked about, all these things that you've conceptualized and created and structured. Then, my friend, this is the step that I find people constantly forgetting about. You then must reinforce that process. Just bringing people in a classroom and sharing ideas with them and expecting them to learn is incomplete. The real question becomes in the mind of the manager. What must I do after the classroom? What must I do between classrooms so that my people can understand the ideas? These ideas become a part of their instinctive behavior, and they can use these ideas over and over and over in ways that can make our organization stronger and more successful. Reinforcement. Some ideas for reinforcement might be that you want to give them an audio tape from time to time. You might want to give them a sheet of paper, a workbook, let's say, or a worksheet that they could do in their own home. Maybe it's something that your own department heads would do with your own people from time to time. Whatever these ideas are, just know that all of us must have reinforcement if we are to own the ideas and to use them in some substantial way. After reinforcement comes the monitoring process. Is it working? Are all the people doing the things we ask them to do? Are the workbooks being distributed in the manner we want it to be distributed? Is the reinforcement process being carried out at the times that we want to be carried out, in the ways that we want to be carried out? Once you monitor and you ensure that your plan, let's say building this house, the plan that the engineer and the architect have prepared, is being carried out by the construction person, by the builder, in the way that you want it to be done, then you go to the measurement process. Now let us measure to see if our ideas are working. Are our people learning the things that we want them to learn? Are they using these ideas? Why? Why not? Are we getting the results from our salespeople or our customer service people or our managers in the way that we had imagined we should be getting from them? The measurement part is so significant because the measurement part is what tells you whether or not your investment of resources, time, energy, and money were useful to you and gave you the kind of return that you had anticipated. And finally, of course, you have the improvement stage. If things are not working the way that you want them to work, what can we do to make them work better? If things are working, how can we use them over and over again so that we can repeat this process many more times? Let's review 10 steps on how you can build this significant process in your company or in any department within your company. First, commitment. Then assessment. 3 is conceptualization. 4 is structuring of the program. 5 5, the creation part. 6, administration, carrying it out. 7, reinforcement. What can I do to make sure my people are learning? 8, monitoring. Is everything working the way I expect it to be working? 9, measurement. Let's see if this is paying off. And 10, improvement. How can we make it better so next time we achieve even greater results? Over the years, working with a lot of companies and a lot of people, I've discovered some very interesting things. That there are really some characteristics that if you follow them, you will make for a more effective educational program. Assuming you follow those 10 steps we've talked about, assuming you do understand the differences between education and training, there are still some characteristics that if you'll follow them, great things begin to happen. Here they are. Number 1, ensure that what you are doing with your people is comprehensive. Do not deal with small parts of the development of the human being. If the reason we are doing what we're doing is to get results from our people, then we have to appeal to the whole person to be comprehensive. By that I mean offer different content on different subjects. By that I mean involve more and more people from different departments. Permeate the whole organization and permeate the whole body of knowledge in a way that people can tap into it, learn from it, and do something as a result of it. Second very important characteristic is that learning has to happen as a continuum. You and I do not learn by merely having single exposure to an idea. You and I learn by listening to the idea, internalizing the idea, using the idea, measuring the idea, improving on the idea. And so learning is not an event that you do once in a while. If you really want your people to change and become better and give you greater productivity and better performance, you must offer learning as an ongoing process. Not only comprehensive, but also as a continuing process. Third characteristic, what value is education? What value is training if there is no on-the-job application? The ideas that your people learn in the classroom must somehow be given an opportunity to be used on the job. If you don't use it, you lose it. And we must encourage our people to try a new idea. And why? To be afraid of failing. It's okay to try an idea and fail once in a while than to never try anything new. If there's anything constant in our world, it is change. You and I must grow if we are to do good things and make better things happen. So on-the-job application then becomes very important. The fourth characteristic is what I call content equity. Content equity. Your people are asking this question. What does this material, what does this course, what do these ideas have to do with me? What do these ideas have to do with our company? If you can show me how these could be customized and tailored and applied in my world, I pay much more attention to them and I am more capable to internalize them and use them in my life. So the more you can do that says this is our company's material, this is our stuff, this applies to us, maybe it's case studies, maybe it's ideas that come really out of their life, the more personal it then becomes. The last characteristic is this. You must have credible leadership. My friends, if you do not have credible leadership, if the individual leading the session in your business is someone that your people do not look up to as someone who is informed, experienced, outstanding in his own or her own right, then the messenger makes the message insignificant. The message may be magnificent, but the messenger messes it up. So make sure that the individuals who are sharing these ideas with your people are individuals that your employees look up to as individuals of credible background and experience. As a footnote to all this, of course, all learning, if it's going to be good and useful, must be repetitious. It must be repetitious. It is okay to learn ideas over and over again. How do you learn the language that you speak? You do it over and over and over again. How do people learn how to dance or drive a car or fly a plane? They do not learn these things at first exposure. They learn these things by doing them over and over and over again. It is okay to repeat ideas and to use them in a fashion that people say, I know this, and I'm glad that you reminded me of it so I can become better. Let us summarize what we've talked about in this session. We've said that education is important, training is important. Technical training is very significant, but behavioral training is equally significant. And you must do both if you are to get outstanding performance from your people. We must understand the differences between training and education. We must follow the steps outlined in this session if we are to have a very solid educational program that brings for you, your department, your company, and even the customers whom you serve a sense of excellence. Excellence that you can be proud of. Performance that you look up to. Productivity that makes you feel good in your journey to a profitable undertaking. So, my friends, to have this enormous productivity and performance in your company, you must follow these steps. You must do them with a continuous effort and go for it as you travel this journey towards excellence.
إلى هنا بتكون محاضرتنا قد انتهت. شكرا لحسن استماعكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.